morning, everyone. Welcome to the annual meeting of the Police and Crime Panel. We've got a lot of new faces here today, and so I think the first thing that it would be good to do is to do some introductions. The acoustics are not good in this room, so there's a plea to just speak up as loud as you can throughout the meeting, please. So I will kick off, and I'm Samantha Wilkinson, and I'm the Police and Crime Panel Officer.
And I'm Al Garthwaite, and I'm Councillor of the City Council.
Hi everyone, I'm Alan Rees, I'm an officer and Director of Strategy, Communications and Policing at West Yorkshire Command Post.
Hello, Wendy Stevens, I'm Research Manager for the Police and Crime Office at Wicker and also support for Alison at Panel.
Hello, I've got a chest infection on bronchitis, so I'm not my usual loud self. I'm also the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime.
Good morning, I'm John Robbins, Chief Constable, West Yorkshire Police. It's good to see some of the new faces and some previous incumbents of this panel. I look forward to working with you all.
Morning, I'm Elise Newman, I'm Chief Superintendent of Washington.
Andrew Wheeler, I'm Councillor Deputy. Paul Sullivan, Councillor from Bradford.
Mark Carter from Leeds.
Robert Thornler, Councillor of Cardiff Council.
Safran Zia, Councillor in Bradford.
Jo Sykes, I'm with the independent members serving on the panel.
Sarah Courtney, Councillor in Cornwall.
Anthony Smith, Councillor from Lindy, Leeds.
Sinead Engel, Councillor from Bradford.
Councillor from Hallett from Wakefield.
Julie Reid, Head of Police and Crime at West Yorkshire from Bradford.
Fiona Bernardo, I'm Panel Support Officer at Westminster.
Morning, I'm Paul Shaw from Leeds.
Sharon Fraser from Wakefield Council, Legal Advisor to the panel.
And just to mention, we also have Trevor Lay, who's the independent member who's joining us online.
Good morning, everybody. The first item today is the appointment of Chair for the next year. Can I invite nominations for Chair, please?
Nominate Paul. Happy to accept the nomination.
Any other nominations?
Nominate Samantha Councillor for Deputy.
This is for the appointment of Chair. Once the Chair's been appointed, then we will move to take nominations for Deputy Chair. If I may then ask everybody to vote by a show of hands, either for, against or an abstention. So first we'll ask for those voting for Councillor Garthwaite.
Sorry.
Again, by a show of hands, those voting against. And again, by a show of hands, those in abstention.
So, I've miscounted now. I've got 10 for, no against, and no abstentions.
What about Trevor?
Trevor can't vote online, has to be geographically present.
Tuft.
Yes, it's bad luck.
Voting is by a simple majority and then is present. Do we have a simple majority?
We do.
I can confirm that the Chair for the year ahead is Councillor Garthwaite.
Thank you. I look forward to fulfilling this responsibility to the best of my abilities. So now we proceed to the election of the Vice Chair. And I believe there's been you have a nomination. I believe there's
Amanda Councillor.
one nomination for Amanda Carter, thank you. And any other nominations?
Nomination for Osman.
Councillor Ali. Thank you, could you both say a few words about yourself and your interest in being Vice Chair? As Amanda was nominated first, let's start with Amanda.
Thank you. I've been a councillor in Leeds for quite a number of years now, and shadow cabinet member for community safety. I was instrumental in sorting out the whole vet issue with the sex workers and instrumental in having it closed down. strongly believe that women should not be controlled by men or other women, if that's the case, and that was one of my passions. I sit on the Domestic Violence Board, and I sit on the Safe Needs Partnership. In a previous life, I worked for Martin House Children's Hospice as a fundraiser, and I went on to work at the Police Treatment Centre as PR manager and fundraising manager. I sat on various committees through the council, chaired city centre plans, and community committee chair for Outer West. I've worked a long time alongside the police. I've won 2 awards for innovation in charity. One was for a music event for young people, and the second one was for working with children in deprived areas. I also set up and created the Leeds Bradford Partnership, which was designed to try to bring the 2 cities together and to improve the areas between the 2 cities, the corridor between the 2 cities. And that was one of the 5 acclaimed things that the Labour government put forward for in that year, so it was by the Labour government. And that's about it really. I've been on the police crime panel for quite a number of years now, so quite experienced in this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Malik, newly elected council, political council, over 10 years experience working in communities. I'm in the voluntary sector, trustee in the voluntary sector in Wakefield. I'm a law graduate, by the way, just recently graduated. I'm also the vice chair for the transport subcommittee for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. I've been a vice chair for a number of years. I've also chaired the West Yorkshire Islamophobia Conference in 2019 and the one in 2021 as well. I've got a very good working relationship with the police. I've started the West Yorkshire Police Independent Advisory Group for the last couple of 4 to 5 years. I also sit on the Wakefield Independent Advisory Group for West Yorkshire Police and the Wakefield Scrutiny Panel. I have a keen interest in expanding the public and providing and supporting people with community safety. I think I will do my best as a vice chair by representing Wakefield on this panel as a vice chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We can now proceed to a vote. Is everyone content with the vote by show of hands?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to suggest anything different. Okay, we'll take the voting in the order that the nominations took place. So, to start with, those who would like to vote for Councillor Amanda Carter, please raise your hands. Okay. Anyone? We go through against. Anyone against? Okay. And abstentions. So, thank you. Now, those who wish to vote for Councillor Osman Ali. Thank you. Those against? Abstentions. Thank you. So, do we have a simple majority?
We have a simple majority for Councillor Amanda Carter.
So, Councillor Amanda Carter is appointed as Vice Chair for 2022 to 23. Thank you. We'll move on to acceptance of apologies for absence. Do we have any? We do have at least one apology, don't we?
We have apologies from Councillor Morrington King.
Thank you. I'm really sorry. Police and Crime Panel membership. And we do have the report attached. So, does anyone have any questions or comments on this report? Item 2. No?
Chair, I think it comfortably lays out the arrangements for the next 12 months and clearly establishes a process for moving roles. I think it's how we move to accept the role.
Yes. Yes. So, we have the someone to move the report. Joe?
Yes.
I second it. Thank you. The report is accepted. So now we go to the acceptance of apologies for absence.
Next we have apologies from Councillor Norrington.
Thank you.
And the mayor.
And from the mayor. That's great. Thank you. So now we move to the minutes of the meeting of the Police and Crime Panel held on the 8th of April 2022. I'm not in any position to say whether these minutes are a correct record or not, as I was not here. But could anyone comment or point out any potential flaws in the minutes if you would go to say?
I was present at the meeting and I would move them as a true and accurate record. And I'll have to second that.
Accurate record, okay. Accept as an accurate record, thank you. Now, any matters arising that aren't going to come up in the rest of the agenda? Anybody? I'll go through page by page, just in case. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. I think we can say that there are no matters arising, so we can therefore, could somebody, that we'll move on to any...
Sorry, could I just, on 9.3.1 that the Mayor brings to report to the future meeting regarding any intervention work, we'll just make sure that is put into the future forward agenda plan at some point.
Yes, but we shouldn't lose sight of that particular report.
Yeah.
Yes. Does the Deputy, do you have any idea of when you might accept that report?
So what we'll do is we'll work with the office outside of this meeting and agree a time frame.
Fine. Okay, thank you. Right. Anything else? Good. So we'll move on to item 5 in that case. This is to note any items which the Chair has agreed to add to the agenda on the grounds of urgency. Now, I'm not aware of any items in this category. No? Good. So
Chair, if I could just be excused for a brief period, I just need to join another meeting remotely. I will come back to apologise.
yes, of course. We'll move on to Angus Declaration of Interest. I'll remind you of the requirement to make an appropriate verbal declaration at a meeting of any items on the agenda in which you have an interest. If you do have that interest, you are asked to complete a form detailing the declaration, which is available from the Police and Crime Panel officers at this meeting. Does anyone have a declaration of this type to make? No. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 7, where we have a report on panel arrangements and rules of the conduct of business. And we are asked to review and endorse the panel's procedures and protocols to ensure they remain fit for purpose for the discharge of the panel's functions. And there haven't been any changes to the procedures and protocols at this time. For experienced members who are used to this, there's no changes proposed. for new members, this is the same as it's been for a while. Are there any questions or comments on this? No? Therefore, are we happy to move to endorse? Excellent. Who would like to do that? Thank you. Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. Good. So, this is the usual formal business of an AGM. And we now move to item 8, the Police and Crime Panel Complaints Annual Update. And this reviews the complaints, an overview of the complaints received by the Police and Crime Panel over the past year. And we certainly note as a panel that the small number does not reflect the amount of work that it causes officers to dealing with every complaint, working out whether it's something suitable for coming to the panel, whether it should be more properly sent elsewhere, and also assisting members of the public with any complaints that they may have, assisting them to direct them into the right area. So this report is for us to note, and we see that there's one recorded ongoing complaint, which will be settled in the fullness of time. Further information is being sought, and there were 11 complaints not recorded because they were signposted elsewhere. Of course, Yorkshire Police, other organisations, and one complaint about policy. So, just to note the report, is that satisfactory to everyone? Good to do that, no questions? Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 9, the review of panel complaints and misconduct procedure. Now, this is to agree the wording of panel's complaints procedure, and there is on this one an amendment which everyone's received a copy of. This proposed additional wording clarifies the process and actions that can be taken, and it's attached for our consideration. And what I'm asking you to do is to approve it, if you wish to do so, and include it within the reviewed complaints and misconduct procedure. So it's been supplied to us as item 9 Appendix B, and it concerns repetitive, vexatious and unreasonable complaints and complaints. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to read this. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this? No? So, if in that case, is someone prepared to nominate that it be approved?
No, Chair.
You will, thank you, Councillor Sullivan. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Engel. So that is now approved, so it will form part of the Police and Crime Panel's complaints and misconduct procedure. Thank you. Now, item 10 was to have been the panel budget outcome 2021-22 and the draft budget for 2022-23, but we do need to defer this item until the next panel meeting. This is because the Home Office financial information is not entirely with us as yet. So that's how it is. We'd look to be looking at that at the next meeting, or depending on the Home Office at the one after, as soon as it arrives. All right, everyone? Yeah. So that, in fact, includes the main business of the AGM. Unless anyone has anything else they wish to bring up, we'll go straight on into the more general business of the panel today. The reports, the 2 reports that have been submitted to us. And I expect that some of you will have questions, comments, But first of all, the first one being on safeguarding, I'd ask the Deputy Mayor to introduce the paper and highlight the key points first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really delighted to meet the new panel and looking forward to working with you over the next 12 months. Congratulations, obviously, congratulations, Chair, on your appointment too. So we decided to only bring a couple of papers this time because obviously the majority of the business was in the AGM, but we decided on two really pertinent issues that have been raised many times on this panel. The first would be safeguarding, and this links to the strategic priority of keeping people safe in buildings and rooms, which is in the new policing plan now, and hopefully all got a copy, especially the new members, so you can see how we're going to be reporting back to you against the priorities in that. Going forward, we'll show in each paper the strategic priority that this leads to in the plan, using the relevant icon, polite icons, so we'll be using those, and hopefully be able to see how we're progressing against the metrics within the plan. So clearly you've read it, the paper, which is really comprehensive. We were asked by the panel to try and always focus on children and young people as part of every report, and this report has got a really heavy focus on children and young people, but it's also got a focus on the successes, the achievements of the work that West Yorkshire Police is doing with children and young people, which I ask you to note. There are a couple of things that are of particular interest and that we should be celebrating. One's smart water, the forensics marking initiative for domestic abuse. It's been used in the past for a variety of other uses, but now it's being used really effectively for domestic abuse. And it's just recently won the National Police Professional Innovation Award, and it's been shortlisted for the British Security Awards. And so some great work going on, and I think it was featured as a news item in the BBC because West Yorkshire was the first force to actually get a prosecution using the smart water. So it's a great thing. Another really positive area to point between the report is the appointment of a suicide prevention coordinator who not only will look at suicide amongst policing, which is a really incredibly important place to understand the pressures that police are facing. And we've sadly lost some police in the last 12 months. So I'm really delighted that this post has been brought in. It's also going to be looking at suicide of victims of domestic abuse, which is quite innovative. There's a lot of emerging research about the number of domestic abuse victims who go on to take their own lives, but we don't have a real clarity about those numbers. And some of the research I've seen is saying as high as 3 people a week, usually women, but not always dying as a result of suicide to escape a domestic abuse situation. So again, an incredibly important development. The Mayor and I have talked several times about our focus on stalking, and so it's really pleasing to see the establishment of the force-wide stalking coordination team and the specialist investigators training that's been developed to run alongside that, and also the police are piloting the second stage of the NPCC stalking screening tool. So real focus on stalking, which was something that when we did the call to evidence last September, stalking was a big issue that was raised with us by the people who attended that session. So it's great to see that West Yorkshire Police's focus on stalking. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say. Really happy to answer any questions in that.
Councillor Angle.
Thank you. I'm looking at 2.8.2. It's fantastic, the introduction of the package around neurodiversity awareness. And certainly from conversations I've had with PCs and PCSOs in my local area, that's something they've been asking for based on the number of times they encounter people affected by neurodiversity. I'm just wondering if there's a time frame for this training to be rolled out.
Well, I'll refer to the Chief Constable because he'll know better than I.
Well, to go back to I haven't got it to hand. The part of the strategic training and programme, as you've seen throughout the whole report, there's tens, if not, in multiple training strands around domestic abuse, mental health, neurodiversity, stalking, harassment, race, hate, use of force, all sorts of things that all have to be scheduled in. So I don't know the date of that one, but we'll come back to the panel in the written form.
Thank you. And I should just point out that neurodiversity is an area that we've been raising with West Yorkshire Police following the casework that we get from members of the public who have identified that this has been a gap and you'll be more likely to be part of the criminal justice system if when neurodiversity challenges, and so we need to really understand what's happening. Vulnerable people sometimes become criminalised as a result of lack of awareness.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Yes, from its context, I think I have an idea what neurodiversity means, but I've never heard the word. Is there a dictionary definition or a legal definition?
I'm sure it's both. It's an umbrella term for things, for example, like autism, people with autistic spectrum, but it's much more wide-ranging than that. So people who maybe don't think in the same way as people who are not neurodiverse, and so I'll seek to get some more information for later.
Well, I guess correctly, but I think a legal definition, if we ever have to deal with it in detail, will be handy. Thank you.
Just in layman's terms, I want to describe as the majority of people running on a Windows operating system, neurodiverse people seem to be running on a Mac OS. So it's that different sort of way of being wired. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Usually it's best if you speak through the
Sorry,
chair,
yes,
but
sorry.
I understand why you interjected at that point. So, Councillor Nazir.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick points. The first one was in terms of the performance measures there in table 1.4. The direction of travel on roads has not been positive in terms of reducing numbers. What's been done to look at that? And the second point was in terms of in relation to 2.7. Around forced marriage, genital mutilation, sort of honor abuse, and the extra work that's being done on that. Is there any sort of numbers in terms of improvements that we've made on that over time?
So I'll ask the Chief Constable to respond. I didn't hear the second, I'm sorry, because of this thing, I'm on one, so I can't hear what he said. So the first bit was about performance measures of 1.4.
Yeah, and the second one was just in terms of, there's been excellent work done in relation to around 2.7, but is there anything to back up in terms of what improvements we've made in tackling issues around sort of on-base abuse, forced marriages, etc. It would just be interesting to know how that's going to be work that's been done over time, what impact that's had.
So I'll ask the Chief Constable to comment on those issues. But I am aware that West Yorkshire is working really closely with Carbon Environment, and obviously they're experts in this area and have been training businesses for many years, and lots of the learning from Carbon Environment has been transferred to West Yorkshire Police to the benefit, I think, of the citizens of West Yorkshire.
So, forgive me to those panel members who've heard me speak before around crime recording, but for the new panel members, you're entering into a new world of understanding national and local statistics. Recorded crime is often seen as an indicator of success or failure. However, it's been for the last 10 years an issue for policing around getting that recording right. So I will not seek forgiveness for reminding you that West Yorkshire Police is one of only a few forces in the country who's been graded as outstanding for recording crime properly So many of the answers that I'm going to give you, you could be forgiven for hearing it's like a broken record on the chief crystal, when is this going to be over? So we do things correctly and in the best possible manner to get the best intelligence, the best circumstances. So, in terms of the three indicators you made reference to about young people flagged as criminal exploitation, our overall strategic objective, of course, is to have less young people at harm. However, we need to understand that, so we flag both victims and witnesses. It's still a relatively new process over the last few years, so we're in an element of making sure that we're doing it right. We'll flag far more people as being at risk of harm than many of the forces. You'll make your own judgment as to whether that's correct or more worrying for West Yorkshire or not. I'd invite you to seek reassurance from that, actually, that we're flagging young people so we can target those people who seek to abuse them. Similarly, the issues around domestic abuse, it's gone from 30,000 to 30,000 to 33,000. And again, it's part of our ongoing relentless strategy to make sure that when members of the public ring us reporting domestic abuse, of course that doesn't just involve violence, that we're recording that correctly when it comes through to a crime. So we convert more calls of domestic abuse to crimes than anyone else in the country, and we'll continue doing that because we want to continue building the picture. I'll give you some reassurance just in terms of when you think of domestic abuse, it's all elements of domestic abuse are of course serious, but these aren't usually, the recording areas are not usually around issues of violence, they're around arguments between two brothers over remote control, around arguments about whose bedroom other people are going to use, because those are domestic abuse incidents by the national definition. So of course there is a significant amount of assault and abuse in there, but we believe firmly that we're still on a rising trajectory of recording incidents. That then comes on to the third element. The more you record, the more you identify victims, the more you get repeat victims. So I'm genuinely not trying to mess around with statistics or try and influence you with something that isn't correct. But you just need to seek some assurance over the course of the months and years coming ahead on the panel that other inspectorates, whether that be HMIC or Care Quality Commission or Victims and Witnesses Commissioners and other people, will generally be saying, actually we're doing the right thing. But that gives me some difficulty because often it seems crime going on, but it's recorded crime, not necessarily real crimes. So, the flip side of that is the rest of the report you'll see we're absolutely ruthless and relentless in our drive to safeguard people. We're putting more and more training into that area all the time. We're putting more and more scrutiny into it. And we're putting more and more people as and when we can get more investigators trained into that area. Sometimes at the risk of other parts of policing, and that's the value judgments that we've got to make. So, long answer, I apologise, I won't go on that one today. It's just a slight context that not always going on is bad.
But this is repeat people, so it's obviously, it's not when you're talking about recording people for the first time, finding unintended recordings, improving, that's understandable, what we're improving our system, to be able to get the right data, but two indicators are people that we're already aware of, that are in the system, recorded, so those figures, at some point, in terms of work that we do with the victim, work that we do with the perpetrators, that should show the downward trajectory at some point, right?
In theory, if I pick you up and take you to another force somewhere else, you won't get those crimes recorded, so you won't know you've got repeats. So that's the point I was trying to make. But I agree with you, the long-term objective of working with partners and local authorities is to reduce repeats. If you take all the academic research around domestic abuse, by the time it takes somebody to come to the police to report it, the number of offences that occurred before then. So I agree with you, the overall objective is to reduce numbers, reduce repeats. And I just say every statistic here we give some caution, because the national statistic processes and journey that we've gone through over the last 20 years, so if you put targets into the public sector and then abide by the target being success, you will see reverse behaviour. We'll see it in education, NHS, we'll see it in policing. So we've just got to be cautious.
And I just said that obviously policing is part of a wider partnership, and it's right that we're working together with our local authority and other justice partner agencies to address not just domestic abuse, but also the number of young people who are flagged as a risk of exploitation. And actually, the fact that someone is flagged as a risk just means to say that they belong to be criminally exploited. It means that we're being proactive and trying to ensure that those young people get that wraparound support. So every day, the Mayor and I get what's called the FMDL, the Force Management Daily Log, that tells us what's happened in those 24 hours. And pretty much every day we will get a young person who's been flagged. According to this measure, they have been previously flagged as being at high risk. And they have gone missing, usually from their unregulated care homes, which is why the report talks about a piece of work that the Mayor of West Yorkshire Police trying to do with leaders and the planning and licensing and children's services, for example, to get a better grip of unregulated care homes. But we're trying to make sure that we're working as one union, as one partnership, extending the mass arrangements beyond just safeguarding into other arenas, because we know that young people are being exploited by unsavoury characters on a daily basis, and we're trying to prevent that from happening. But the police are one part of making that happen, and not every part. We all need to go on it to get us to where we need to get to.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
So the second part of the question.
Yeah, of course.
Around forced marriage.
Yes.
Or gender interaction. On the basis of use and FGM. Again, quite a lot like the answer, we're in a place where working with partnerships, we've got to try and establish the true levels of these crimes. One of them is predominantly health-based interventions, and we'll only get those information through other agencies. So the more successful we are in getting the message out, the more successful we are in recording crimes, and because we're compliant with crime recording programs, the more successful we are. The answer to, I think the question is when we know what success looks like, or when we will get to that. I think we'll judge that as a society and as a partnership as to where we are. Clearly, no crime in those areas is success.
On the FGM issue, I will just say that I previously worked for Touchstone, as some of you will know, and Touchstone had the national contract for the North to work with non-pregnant survivors of FGM. And it was, we worked with lots of police forces because the threshold that you had to demonstrate in court to prove that somebody had been cut was so high that it was really difficult for courts to find alleged perpetrators guilty because the medical knowledge around FGM wasn't there. And so this is just for information because this is an area of work that I was involved in for many years. It's called Blossom, the services that's run by Touchstone for the North. It's actually been featured in The Guardian and in various other publications. So if you Google it, you'll get that information. But there are very, very few convictions. I think probably one nationally, because the understanding in the medical fraternity of what constitutes FGM is so poor. But hopefully these new clinics that have been commissioned by the NHS, hopefully these clinics will help to build that medical picture to bring more people to justice.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you. You have touched on it, Chief Constable, but I'd like to just explore the movers of policing. You've said that safeguarding department is almost all doing very well, and obviously that is extremely important. It's one of the most important things to safeguard people when you do everybody else as well. But what about the other departments, neighbourhood policing? How is that affecting neighbourhood policing and other departments, please?
So thankfully we've been in the last 2 to 3 years through the support of the Mayor's Office in terms of precept on this panel and through support of national government in terms of the Police Uplift Programme. we've been on a rising trajectory after a decade of reducing officer numbers. So the increases in safeguarding department are coming in effect from the increases into policing, so we're not directly reducing others. However, we are having a real specific challenge, as are many other public sectors, around recruitment, timeliness, flow, and capture really for better work. So it's great to be recruiting all of these new officers into policing, but they're young in service, young in experience, and in some ways young in knowledge and operational prowess. So for obvious reasons, we can't just pick them up and put them straight into safeguarding, so it's taken us some time. But to you, Councillor Carter, and to the panel, I give you a commitment. I'm desperately trying not to affect neighbourhood policing, patrol policing, specialist investigations or operational support. But it is that balance, it is that constant balance. There are less officers, as we've discussed before, than there have been in the past in neighbourhood policing. However, we're giving a more responsive service than we've ever given in response policing. Those officers in neighbourhood policing are left now in the main to provide dedicated problem-solving approach rather than trying to multitask all of the time. So it's good news that there's more people going in safeguarding, and it's good news that in the main they're coming in effect through the increases to the police budget from a variety of sources. It just takes that time because the actual people going in safeguarding are people who were recruited 3-5 years ago. They need to be taken through patrol and neighbourhood policing before they get, and then the new recruits replace those in that approach. Does that make sense?
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, there's a lot of good work going on safeguarding, it's quite obvious, looking at the report and looking at what's going on. One of the issues that I come across in the area where I represent is exploitation of people with learning disabilities. So financial, sexual services, those sort of issues going on. And I'm just wondering if there's anything specific that we're doing with adults with learning disabilities in terms of training for police or a special focus on that or specialism, because sometimes adults with learning disabilities are not necessarily as visible, if you like, as others sometimes. Sometimes not.
Absolutely, and you'll be pleased to know that our office is heavily engaged with several learning disability charities through the consultation on police and crime plan, for example, and we've been getting feedback from people with learning disabilities about what their needs are and what they need us to be doing, and it's definitely, so for example, when we put out a consultation, we worked with Change, a small learning disability charity, and they put all the information into accessible information, for example, and we sent that out to all the learning disability charities that knew about across West Yorkshire, and United Response invited me then to a huge conference that they were holding in Leeds, and I presented at that conference, and then the young people who were there presented their views on the police and crime plan to me, and I followed up with United Responses. So the police and crime team has got lots of connections with learning disability organisations, and we do raise through those contacts and through casework that we get, as I described for neurodiversity, the times when the police don't get it right, and we ask that then be incorporated into the training that the police are delivering. But as the Chief Constable explained, the amount of training that police have to undertake is substantial, and it all has to be timed to make sure that everyone can get the training but also do the deployment. I'll let Chief Constable comment specifically.
So, yeah, we do. We intend to encompass all of the areas of intervention today in terms of vulnerability. So people presenting different vulnerabilities in different ways. We've had some national training under some of our assessment processes, which we look from the point of the call through all the investigations. We talk about thrive, which is threat, harm and risk to individuals, investigations, vulnerability and engagement with communities. We're starting already within the panel to unravel some of the challenges within policing. If I draw the analogy to many other, the military spend all their life training and never, thankfully, really engaging. Policing spends all its time engaging, doing the job, and very hard struggles to find the time to train. So all these areas of vulnerability that you're unpicking, whether it be neurodiversity, adult vulnerability, alcohol, sexual health, ethnicity, background, language, a whole host, is the challenges that every frontline police officer comes up against every day. And all of them, to have every aspect and every element to be the best interactive that they can possibly be. But put yourselves in their position, and put yourselves in the position of what they're trying to deal with. They do a fantastic job, and we do everything we possibly can to train them in all these elements. And on top of that, they've also got legislative processes and all of the other training we need to do. So it's a real dilemma, because we need them to be out of the jobs, doing the investigations, doing the work, and we struggle to find the time to train them because they really take them out of that service delivery starts going down. So we do a whole host of our mental and disabilities. Within our safeguarding investigative capacity is generally split into child protection, adult protection is around elder, domestic abuse and mental health and other disabilities. So it does have specialisms within it as well.
And I know, for example, that cuckooing is a big area that's included in that training, and the police and crime team, we're part of a national group that looks at cuckooing, for example. We're working on a wider antisocial behaviour remit, but within that cuckooing, particularly in vulnerable people and people with disabilities, is one of the aspects of the work that we do.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp is next.
Point 2.9.1. What key issues trigger the report on missing persons, and what issues need addressing as a result of the action?
So as I said right at the beginning of the introduction, the Mayor and I get the FMDL and we have regular conversations with the Chief Constable about we know what policing are doing, what do we all need to create is a wider system to protect children and young people, how can we bring value from the office of the Mayor to policing into this preventative and early intervention arena that we've put in the police and crime plan. And so that triggered a report that has been developed by West Yorkshire Police and which is helping us to understand who's going missing, where those young people are coming from. In the main, it's young people from unregulated care homes. You need to understand it's really complicated. The local authorities are literally dumping young people from all over the country in West Yorkshire. We have, compared to some areas of the country, relatively cheap housing. Anyone can set up as an unregulated housing support provider. The care stuff is regulated. We've got to have CQC regulation that you're providing care. But to a vulnerable young person, maybe 15, 16, 17, you can have an unregulated provider who basically provides very, very minimum, and local authorities are paying these providers. Some of them are great. I think about Leeds has got Owls, for example, which is a consortium of very well regarded first sector organisations. They meet some very high standards. I know them all very well, and that is great, but that you have less scrupulous providers too, and so young people are not protected. And I saw some examples of young people, for example, a young woman being placed into a provision next to a male hospital, for example, and she is a former victim of CSEA, and she was placed next to a male hospital because these providers don't think about that stuff and don't get regulated. So we're currently looking at bringing together some other information from other local authorities about what good practice looks like to take to a future leaders meeting, and we're hoping that the leaders will then initiate conversations in their own local authorities about what we can do differently and better. So for example, Leeds, I've already met Fiona Becker to talk about what Leeds are doing. For Leeds, when an application comes for a support provision for young people, comes through planning immediately informs children's services. And that means that children's services are on it and can then go to that provider and say, well, what are you doing, where's it going to be, these are the things that we expect to see. And there are various things that we think that the leaders and local authorities can really be on top of to to make sure that the experience for these young people is improved and that the risk is reduced. Because even though the police are the ones having to find these missing young people, there are lots of partners who could be helping to prevent those young people being missing in the first place.
Thank you. Councillor Simon.
Yeah, sorry to say back to 2.7 again, and it may be that you need to come back with the figures. I'm wondering for these on-based abuse, forced marriage and FGM, what, for instance, over maybe 10 years, what's the trend? You know, how are we doing with reporting? And Alison, you could have to then, but what are the conviction or at least the positive disposal rates for those reported offences the first two categories? Again, it might be something we need to bring back to us, but it'd be handy to know. Because I imagine with your 120 officers, the figures are going to rocket because awareness is going to go. And we've got to all remember that and not beat you over the head if the figures go up. But we could do with the baseline figures over a decent period of time, not just 12 months.
Yeah, so honor-based abuse is different to female genital mutilation. And honor-based abuse is an umbrella term for a range of activity that is about potentially about religion, or is about perception of culture, or is about a perception of what predominantly women should be doing within the family setting. So it could be classified, it could have been classified as a rape, it could have been classified as a murder, it could have been classified as a domestic abuse. And so I'll allow the Chief Constable to say whether it's possible to get that data for you without lots and lots of work. But the fact that the complainant or the person who might have been engaging with the police about that activity talks about honor-based abuse will be recorded, because, as the Chief Constable said, we are outstanding for recording here in West Yorkshire. But it might have been captured as another offence. FGM, as I've said, I don't think we've got anybody in West Yorkshire that's been convicted of female genital mutilation. There's multiple reasons for that. As I've just described, the mental health are just so hard to get. Yeah, I don't think we've had many or any reports, and because it's not I've worked with lots of women who have been, because I used to work for Touchstone and leave on that service, so I've met several women who have been subject to FGM. They don't talk about it, and they don't talk about it to the police. So I would be very surprised if we've had many reports, but again, I'll let the Chief Constable.
Yeah, the overall recording method has increased in the last 10 years for the reason you said, that we've actually proactively tried to increase recording. We produce a 250-page document every year called Force Management Statement that gives a historical look back on crime statistics and issues of policing and looks forward on it as well. We're getting some extracts out of that for FGM and the crimes you've mentioned.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want you to go to vast amounts of work, just so we've got a handle on it when this subject comes up again.
Yeah, and I should just say that we're bringing safeguarding into the next delivery quarter, so quite a lot of information in this report. We'll get some fresh data on, and we'll begin some interrogation, but also there's some data, isn't just an FGM. Alright, so there's data coming to all your CSPs as well, or your community safety partnerships to get data. So that's another source of information for you. You want to go to CSPs and ask them about the data that they're holding.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney, you're next. Is this on this topic or a different topic?
It was, there was a couple of things. One of them was a comment about the adults and learning difficulties, and but so I'm happy to wait.
Councillor Carter, is this on this topic? It's a different topic. Okay, we'll go
So
straight to you then.
just thank you, and hello everyone. Just the comment about the adults with learning difficulties and exploitation. My understanding is that I think Trading Standards do quite a lot of work around this for the West Yorkshire Services. They do quite a lot of work around that as well. But just, are you getting intelligence? Is there intelligence coming in from local authorities? Are you getting information passed on, or is it just stuff that you're... So I suppose it's about partnership working. Obviously, you know, we know that we have to do, that we're all working in partnership with each other over lots of different things. And is there effective partnership working around that particular area and about other sort of intelligence that comes in around safeguarding? Is that working effectively? And if it isn't, is there things that we, obviously we're, you know, members here of local authorities, is there anything that we can do to help that? So not just specifically around adults with learning difficulties, but additional needs, but just generally around safeguarding.
Thank you. So the training standards unit that you described actually emanated originally from the Office of Police and Crime. So that has been funded that unit for several years. And when I came into post, I asked the key players if they would fund that on a permanent basis. So it's not subsidised by the Office of Police and Crime and the Police and Crime team. But the social care across West Yorkshire funded it, and West Yorkshire Police were already funding it, so they're continuing their commitment, and all the social care directorates agreed to fund that unit. So it's now fully established, and it's not relying on us for its funding. It took us a year to get there, so it's really we're really delighted that that's now been, you know, that's part of the establishment of the training standards. And they do mainly work with all of the vulnerable people. Of course, some of those will have learning disabilities, will be neurodiverse and all the rest of it. So that is brilliant work that's being undertaken. But we did feel very strongly that it was core business of social care that they should be funding the majority, which they do. But there's also a funded, I think it's a sergeant, funded sergeant from West Yorkshire Police. And obviously, on the second point about is it effective? I think it's effective. We've got all the we've got the MASH arrangements that exist across the whole of West Yorkshire. Lots of opportunities for coming together. Can things improve? Yeah, we've just had the STAR Hobson report that tells us that we could always do better.
Councillor Carter, and then Councillor.
Thank you. My question is around mental health. Obviously, mental health is increasing nationally, not just in West Yorkshire. It's a horrendous problem, and there's some brilliant work, not just by Touchstone, but also by Forward Leads, who are doing fantastic work to help people who are not suffering from mental health, but also from alcohol and drug addiction, which is often linked to mental health and mental health starts. They're all whirling, which is why people end up on the street or end up in complex sex work. But this question I have is, if the police suspect somebody has mental health problems, I know that they're calling practitioners then to assess that person, but what is the level of criteria? Because I understand there's a level, and people might not meet that level, but there may still be significant suffering from mental health problems.
Yeah, so clearly each officer dealing with a member of the public will make a call based on their experience of the person that they're with, but they can access, as you said, mental health support in the contact centre. One of the really great things that we've got here in West Yorkshire, I mean it's a national programme, but it's been brought into West Yorkshire really effectively, and I will say that because I was part of the rollout in West Yorkshire in the previous role, is liaison and diversion. And L&D are embedded in all of the cells in Yorkshire. So when someone is presenting, particularly custody sergeant, L&D are there working alongside police and can be brought in to also make that assessment. So even though they're not doctors, we have mental health nurses as part of L&D, and they will absolutely be used as a resource by the custody staff to ensure that the right support is put in place for that person. Clearly, there are arrangements with the mental health, individual mental health trusts across West Yorkshire to make referrals into the crisis teams. That doesn't always work. I was in Bradford a couple of months ago they had literally just said goodbye to somebody who they'd had in themselves for 3 days, who should never have been in themselves, but they had been able to find a bed for that person, been working with local mental health trust and not being able to find a bed for that person, wasn't a bed in the whole country, and so that person had to be held for their own safety, and that taken a lot of time and energy from policing and for work with the custody suite as a result. So there are extremes where police get dragged into the pressures that exist in the ways of the system, which is really unfortunate. When you talk to police, they will say to you, this is the single biggest issue for us because it distracts us from being able to do our jobs. And police officers sat in A&E with somebody for hours and hours and hours trying to get them the right support. So the infrastructure is there, but the capacity isn't.
Councillor Ali.
I just want to ask item 2.5. A multi-agency tender reference document is being drawn up. Do you know how long that will take? What's the progress on that?
Oh yeah, this is about the mass review.
Yeah, mass review, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process that's just been undertaken, it's ongoing, and obviously it's going to be taking, it's as part of a process that involves all the local authorities and the key partners. So I don't think John knows how far we are into that review.
No, it's as you say, they've started the multi-agency safeguarding hub review, which includes multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. So the arrangements, the protocols, the hub is the place, and we're just trying to work up how we can, what areas to best inspect. So it's work in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nazir.
Just a quick question in terms of something that's not in this report I would pick up elsewhere, which is children groomed in relation to terrorism and stuff, in terms of is that picked up elsewhere, or should it be in terms of included within the same kind of report?
Well, it could, but it does sit under another work stream. There's huge amounts of work lying under the. I try to use the word prevent because it has so many different connotations for so many different people, but it does come under that work stream, and some really positive examples of work, because I have several briefings on work that goes on in schools, for example. Many of the referrals coming from education, so lots and lots of referrals from schools around young people being potentially being affected in that way. And we're doing lots of work to try to engage health more, because actually we think that that's a gap, and that health would be a more effective partner in helping us to identify where there is some potential that people are being exploited.
Councillor Angle.
Sorry, just a quick query. My husband is employed by Yorkshire Educational Trust. Now, his role does not involve doing that kind of work, but the organisation is employed by still several people, so I need to declare that as an interest.
Thank you. We'll be invested in there before we go afterwards.
Does that count as a declaration? Yes. Sorry, you can. Yeah. I've got another question then. Anecdotally from speaking to a number of secondary school pupils, and also as highlighted by a recent Ofsted report to school near me, a different schools of pupils I've been speaking to, there seems to be a recent upsurge in homophobic bullying and use and harassment in schools. The Ofsted report for a different school to the one I'm most aware of, highlighted the failure of that school to safeguard against homophobic bullying within school. I'm just wondering if there is, if that sort of trend recently has been picked up elsewhere, and what more can be done in terms of assisting schools to safeguard these young people.
So I'm going to ask that question because here in West Yorkshire we have something called POED, Police Education, and West Yorkshire Police, actually the only force in the country to do it, has commissioned a training course a preventative early intervention training programme, it's not a course, it goes on through the life of the child through school, and hate crime is one of the components of the POLED programme, where from years 1 to 13 there is age-appropriate training around areas of risk and vulnerability for young people. Hate crime, as I say, is one of the areas that is covered in the training. It's completely free to any school, primary or secondary school. Our mayor wrote to every single head teacher in the country, in the county at Christmas, telling them about POLED, and I think we were, last time I looked up, we were about 400. So we were about a tenth of that, just over a tenth of that before she wrote, when we first came into post. And that's growing and growing. So please do encourage the school that you haven't mentioned that you've got concerns about, because they can have that training absolutely free, delivered by West Yorkshire Police and its partners. It's being accredited. Is it Oxford or Cambridge? One of them, can't remember. We do regular. There's regular evaluations of the impact of it. So it's really useful. It's the only programme of its kind, as I say, in the country. But also I should say that even in schools, it's a crime. And if those young people who've experienced homophobia, both my children are gay, I'm very passionate about this, my son is beaten up in his school, so he experienced homophobic bullying. Those children, those families need to report that so that action can be taken. Proportionate, maybe in some cases, but it's always proportionate. But the level of activity that takes place as a result of child bullying might be different if it's that whole thing. But we do need to have those reports to be able to act.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
I think you've raised a very important point there, because I don't have any figures, but I do feel it's on the increase.
It is.
Yeah, I do feel it's on the increase. And I think part of the problem is, certainly in the area where I live, some schools don't want police in the school, and they're more worried about their reputation than about protecting the children. And for me, that is a great concern. And quite often, those kind of schools don't have a police officer going in. It's very good, I think it's a big problem. And I always encourage parents and children to report it, but quite often they don't want to. And as you alluded to earlier, a lot of it goes out on social media, and it's absolutely devastating. But I do feel it's on the increase.
Yeah. Well, POLED covers online crimes as well as hate crime. It covers a very wide range of things, exploitation. It covers lots of things. So it's brilliant to have it here in West Yorkshire, but use it or lose it. So please do encourage all the schools to pick the phone up and get POLED in their schools.
So, through you, Chair, could you circulate the information relating to this to members of the County Assembly?
Yeah, get our office to
That would be most valuable, thank you. Members would like to ask their questions. I've got a comment and a question. I was very pleased to see the information about the Suicide Prevention Coordinator, and I know the stress that's experienced by police officers, especially sometimes new recruits who come in not realising what the job is going to entail. And I'm fortunate where I live that a police officer is in charge of bringing therapy dogs into the stations. She tells me what a difference this can make, just the soothing calmness of it. Lovely little dog, she brings them to the church as well. Very nice. Anyway, I'm glad that is happening. Thank you for the information on that, and indeed for such a comprehensive report. But I was a little surprised that there was nothing here about street harassment of women and girls especially, which, as you know, is enormous and is included in the and mentioned in the police and crime plan, from catcalling, indecent exposure, sexual harassment, unwanted touching, serious assaults, and the actions that are being taken across West Yorkshire, I'm aware of, with Ask for Angela and the great deal that we're doing in Leeds to prevent this, and I wondered whether a report on that is going to come to the future meeting plan.
Yeah, so, even I share your view that it's a very interesting report to get, and obviously we'll talk to the West Yorkshire Police about what that report might look like to bring to a future meeting, and we'll talk to Sam about a date for that. It doesn't sit within safeguarding in the same way, and that's why it's not. No, because that's about harassment and yeah, so it doesn't quite sit under the specialism that is safeguarding. Again, it's co-terminosity with many other things, but there is lots of work going on around street harassment. You've seen the brilliant work that's been going on in Bradford around the universities, for example, which has been a partnership with police, universities, the local authority. So there is extensive work that's been undertaken. Of course, the police have not just been actively supportive of Asfrangula, but they've also been supportive of licensing staffing, with all the work that we've been doing around spiking. So I think that there's a huge amount to tell you about. It's just not really as safeguarding. And actually this report also doesn't tell everything that's going on in safeguarding, which is a snapshot, you can have a look. So, we try to give you a flavour of the work that's going on, but there's always more to tell you about. So, we'll have a chat with West Yorkshire Police about what that might look like. And as I say, talk to Sam about getting that involved plan.
Okay, thank you. I realise you can't cover everything, and there are a lot of cross-cutting themes that some experience you have, but well, some of things also.
Yeah, and some of the work that we're doing will,
and it crosses out. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. If that brings this discussion, which has been full and a lot of questions have been raised and answered. So will this discussion to a close and move on to the next report.
Chair, sorry, can I just make my apologies? I've got a engagement. I've got to get to in Coventry, I'm afraid, so I'm going to have to leave early and apologise. And so I'd like to speak on the meeting.
Right, we'll see you next time. Okay, so we'll move on to the report on road safety. And again, could I ask you to introduce it and have the key points?
Yeah, I'm conscious of time. Yeah, so just to say that this is part of the strategic priority for safe places and thriving communities. It's a paper that I thought you were interested in because we talked a lot about speeding, for example, and I've explained about the introduction of the Vision Zero goal. I'm really pleased to be able to expand on that through this paper, and I'm really happy to answer questions.
Councillor Cooper.
So one of the things that we know with our local councils is that highways officers are quite hands-free. We've not particularly worked in the safety area, and it's a frustration for us as a town. I'm just wondering how good a partner are local councils in terms of dealing with issues like road safety and issues associated with it, because we certainly have a lot of problems trying to get traffic calming measures installed as such. So I'm just wondering, what is that relationship like? Does it vary according to different councils? And what more could be done to improve the situation?
So the operational experience of police with local authorities is not something I'm able to comment on, because obviously I'm not operationally focused. But I can tell you about my own experience of working with local authorities on some casework where, and I'm currently involved in Woolwich Keating, where a site visit with our partners in a few weeks' time to resolve some issues. And I think it's as local councillors, as many of you are on the table, I was a local councillor for 29 years, the hopes that members of the public have to go through to get those traffic calming measures are unbelievably complex, time consuming. Often that's about the DFT guidance, or it's about the the protocols that each local authority puts in place. I think this is sort of uniformity across the local authorities in West Yorkshire. They tend to do similar things. Yeah, it's uniform with that. And obviously some of that is about money, some of that is about resources that they've got, because everything's been cut, and so you have to make the best use of the very small amount of money that each local authority has. But yeah, I think that where local communities are identifying hotspots, areas of concern, they don't always get the response that they should do, in my opinion. And I've experienced this as a councillor myself for, as I said, 29 years, so not a small amount of time. And it was very frustrating often that there had to have been a serious accident or, God forbid, a death before steps could be taken to prevent further incidents. And so, yeah, I've got a lot of time for the public who are being incredibly supportive of their communities, proactively telling local authorities around what needs to be done, and for various reasons local authorities are not always able to respond in the way that they could. I'm not aware of what the police relationship with that is, and I wouldn't want to comment.
Thank you. Councillor Solomon.
Yeah, it's in similar territory. Those who've been here before will remember that myself and Amanda, and I think one or two others, asked about speeding, etc. And Tracy made some positive noises because, I don't know if it's the FT, but the rules are horrendous. And I only just found out that on this partnership board, there's no elected members. It's just police and fire. Well, we're the best will in the world. They're just going to have their own agenda. But if they've got a public screen out them like we have, and I've just been to a meeting yesterday, my ward partnership meeting, and about 80% of it was on traffic and speeding. Now, I realise to deepest, darkest Bradford, I live in the land of pipes and slippers, but people do get run over. You know, and the amount of near misses that never seem to get on any stats. You know, when you get some stats, you think, it just has no relation to what people are telling you. So, I don't know whether it's in your gift or net. Can we get some elected members on the decision-making bodies to change the criteria to what is the everyday experience of our residents?
So we'll be happy to hear that the next Vision Zero board, which I think is the 14th of June. Yeah. I've asked for a paper on this casualty reduction or prevention partnership board. It keeps changing its name. So I asked for a paper on that. Who sits on it? Actually, local authorities do sit on it. Simon Diwali, who is actually
I'm talking about elected members.
Oh, yeah,
people who are voters.
No, I agree. I don't know why elected members don't sit on that, and that's a matter for leaders, because the leaders are responsible for the development of these bodies. So I think that's a political issue that you need to take back to our local authorities. There's been some decision made, I don't know when, I don't know why, that this will be an officer-led group, but Simon Diwali leads it from Bradford, just so you can go talk to him and bend his ear.
Well, I will do, but could you and Tracy take the lead on this and say, you know, we think elected people should be on it?
Yeah, so I'm really happy to ask that question, as I said, the paper's coming. Actually, Collindale's request, Councillor Collindale asked for that to come on the Vision Zero board, so it is. I'm going to find out a bit more about this body, which I know is lots of people have been asking questions about this body for a long time. I should also say that the criteria that this body acts under is the DFT guidance. I spoke to the MP about being spent a couple of weeks ago, came Ledbetter, and asked her to ask the question in Parliament about when we're going to find out what the DFT guide, when the DFT guidance is going to be reviewed, because we were told we were going to get the update guidance in January 2022, or 9 June 2022, and she sent me an email just last week that says the Minister had promised that we'd get it by December 2022, so that piece of work is still being undertaken. and hopefully that might lead to some better application of the public's wishes and views.
Is this guidance I'm thinking might not be law, and I think the whole political idea of mayors is that they've got some teeth to sort out things in their own area. You know, can the mayor direct this beyond or outside guidance, or is guidance law?
So the DFT guidance in the Great Council from 1974, it is become the way that all local authorities have acted since 1974. So in a way, it's now the custom that all local authorities abide by this guidance. And I think that's about protection through the courts, that if you don't follow the guidance and then you are challenged or something happens, then you're exposed. So we need the government guidance to change, and the West Yorkshire Police have fed into that guidance because there has been a consultation period which is now closed. So we have fed into that as a West Yorkshire body. The strategy group, which is led by Julian Jackson, who's also from Bradford, because he chairs that, has also fed into that consultation. So hopefully they'll come up with some much better criteria that will give more power to the people who live locally to be able to change the situations if there is. John, did you want to add anything?
No, it's not for me to make a positive comment about the Deputy Mayor on but to be fair, since coming to office they've really revitalised with the local authorities and part of the agenda and the whole Vision Zero, Fatal 4 initiatives, and we were really looking for that political buy-in. What you've raised before, was being raised, I think we would really welcome elected members involved in it, because all the councillors have raised before, all you get is the police, the local authority, and the revenue saying we can't because of this. That's that point. I look to the ceiling, you know, when we talk about antisocial behaviour, what used to be in place around that in local authorities, when we talk about community safety and the feeling of safety within our city centres and what used to be around that with local authorities, when we talk about children's services and structures, when we talk about roads policing, when all those things have shrunk apart and other people have reduced their resources into that, you then get elected members asking the police what you're doing about it. And of course we've got a role, but it's just an indicator, and a sad indicator, of all the work that used to go on in all these areas, because I'm adamantly firmly of the belief that much of the work around the Fatal 4 can be resolved in local planning and local authority work, but it's about money, and it is about money, accept that. Having said all of that, speaking on behalf of policing, as you're aware, the Metropolitan Police Force is the biggest, then West Midlands, then Greater Manchester, and then West Yorkshire. We do nearly as much enforcement in West Yorkshire as the Metropolitan Police Service. Across all areas of road safety enforcement, we're only second to them, so we're doing more than most other areas. Still not enough, it's never enough. But the answer is not just cops enforcing all of the time, it's the partnership work we've seen across 3 areas. But it needs that strategic councillor-led bite into it, because we can design out a lot of this, not enforce our way out.
This speeding thing.
I'm concerned about time. This conversation is really going on for time. Could I suggest that you follow up anything further that you want to say with directly? Thank you. And continue with Councillor Shaw.
Thanks, Chair. Vision Zero against my scrutiny this year, so we appreciate the leaders and all the work that's gone into it. Just a quick one from me. At point 2.13.4, given the support of residents to extend the PSPO from Bradford, could this method be rolled out in other districts?
Point
2.13.4.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's a partnership approach. I think the police apply, but it's a partnership approach. But absolutely, it works, and the evidence base is there. I can't see why not.
Councillor Cooper.
So, one of the things I was really pleased about with the chief was that the weight limit on a road where lorries kept going through and check 9 people. Well, I've had a real difficulty trying to get police enforcement of that local. So it's one of these things where the council achieves getting the right in, but then then it's the police element that doesn't seem to tie it that well. Just wondering about that area of work and what can be done to get an agreed amount of enforcement. So
Yeah, Sam represented us. As I say, I was a councillor for many years in Arley, where the HOV lane was, a high occupancy vehicle there. And you know, we were regularly asking for enforcement of the HOV. The police have got finite resources, and there was from time to time officers stood, you know, making sure that people were.
They've got a dummy in passengers.
Yeah, exactly. But they did actually sometimes let it happen, and so you will get the police there from time to time. But you know, obviously, if there's a murder that happens or some other high risk occurrence in other parts of West Yorkshire, and we will be first to demand that gets the attention it deserves. We definitely will be seeing the police there from time to time, but it's got to be proportionate to the need and what's happening in the rest of West Yorkshire.
Okay, it's just thinking about an agreed amount.
Well, we can't agree on that.
Not something really.
Yeah. Working with your local member of police and see what we do about it. So I think we'd all want us to follow threat and the risk. So that's what we do. And guess what falls off the bottom is the lowest risk and the lowest harm. And with less officers and less staff, that's the challenge. So I'm trying to be realistic, but that doesn't stop member of police officers. And when we can, I'll see both police officers come in and do something about it.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Can I just talk about Operation Spearside, which from what I can see has been a phenomenal success.
It's brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. And actually my ward has actually benefited from it because we're right on the edge of Bradford. But really I'd sort of would like to see if it could be rolled out across the rest of the authorities and the good side of the because I know that they also suffer from top lights and off-road lights and nuisances. They're not just a nuisance when you're sitting in your garden and sun getting in and you hear them running up. They're dangerous. Obviously, as you know, they threaten people and come on balaclavas and threaten to hurt people. So if we could have it rolled across the rest of the authorities, that would be fantastic.
So unlikely because in Bradford and to a lesser extent Colindale where they've got off Hornell, the CSPs are commissioning these initiatives using, I have to say, the monies that come through the Mayor's office. So previously the 5.2 million that came through Mark Williamson's office, it now comes through the Mayor's office. So Bradford and Colindale choose to use an element of that funding to pay for Spearside and Hornell. And obviously, if the other bits of West Yorkshire Leeds wanted to do the same, then I'm sure the West Yorkshire Police would be delighted to talk to them about what would be possible. But those areas are paying for it, and that's why they're getting it. And I speak to Councillor Susan Hinchley, because she still wants more. So it's not moving on, and I think it's a great thing to have. And I've seen it in operation. I've actually been to Bradford and seen antisocial drivers being pulled over through Spearside, the cars taken off of them. I've seen lorries that haven't been taxed, literally the lorries been taken away. So it's amazing how they take dangerous road users off the road, and we would love to see more of that investment coming from CSPs into those initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Does Councillor Lake have any questions? Can I chat on this one? We can't hear what Councillor Lake has to say, unfortunately, so we've asked him to put any questions in.
It's not councillor, an independent.
As an independent, excuse me, I'll get this right.
I was waiting for my brain.
I understand how many numbers they have to begin. So how long it took to get down to zero.
So item 2.4, it talks about Scandinavian. Yeah, so they say that the Vision Zero, or it's got the understand to zero, but what Level 8's asking is where that started from. So did it start from 1 and came to 0, or did it start at 1,000 and come to 0? So we could for that.
I don't know the answer to that. Sorry, Trevor, I'm just going to ask a question and I don't know the answer to. I can find out.
Can you find out?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Trevor. And Joe, did you?
No.
Thank you, Jen. 2.14 operations now. Dash cam report. As it states in the report, numbers are good. It's easy to put dash cam footage forward. I take it these disposals are these the outcomes of the dash cam. My sort of question is just an overview question. Is it working well? Or is it taking a lot of resources? Officers having to go through a lot of footage? Or is it something what is working well and creating a safer environment?
I suppose it's a balancing act, isn't it? Yes, there is officer time involved in looking through footage. There tends to be quite small and short footage in the main because people don't send the entire journey to wherever they're going. They send the bit that's pertinent to the crime that's being alleged. But the balancing act is it more important to take that time to get those people off on the road who are clearly antisocial car users, putting other road users at risk, potentially risking life and limb and taking life. And I would say yes, it clearly is better. And you can't have, this is much better really than having more police officers on the road. It's great to do that, but in a way you've got, it's like having the specials, isn't it? You've got the public helping you to identify those antisocial road users and they're doing all the work for you, but then you've got to do that bit of work at the end in order to get the outcome that the public need you to get. So I think it's win-win.
I just thought, personally, I think it's a really good initiative. It's just if certain avenues get challenged.
Yeah, well, the video is the video, isn't it? And at the end of the day, people will always employ all sorts of tactics to get out of facing the music for their actions. And I'm sure that happens from time to time. But the amount of positive outcomes that we get by far outweigh those very small risks. If the reason why it's not 100%, I think it says 60-something% reason it's not 100% is because, you know, sometimes the quality of the video is not right, or it's not a crime, might be not great, but, you know, so that's all part of the decision making of the people who are looking at the video evidence before they decide to prosecute or not.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm very conscious of time. Councillor Engel.
Sorry.
And then
just a brief one really. Again on Operation Snap and the relatively low uptake from Bradford. To a Bradfordian, the most obvious way to improve that is by getting the private hire and taxi drivers on board with this, because they spend so much time on the roads that they will witness an awful lot of the driving wrongdoing that occurs. So if you can get those on board, that proportion should come up, and we should catch a few more naughty drivers.
I think the Chief Justice is going to tell us that that's something that already happened.
No, that'd be great if the local authority can make it a condition of their licence, and also helpful for the protection of young girls and boys. They can also make it a condition of the licence that they have CCTV within the taxi as well. Each local authority across West Yorkshire is declining to do all that. So, as well as outwardly looking, it would be nice to have it inwardly looking, because if they're legitimate law-abiding processes, why would we want to safeguard young children and safeguard other road users with that? So we welcome that.
All sorts of licensing flow.
Yeah. And again, this is another area where partnership working is key. You know, this is about holding me to account and the mayor to account for the delivery of police and crime plan. But it's us. It's not me. It's not Chief Constable. It's us. And working together, hopefully we'll get there.
Councillor Sullivan,
We
and
could-
then to George.
Yes, we could incentivise the taxi drivers to do what the Chief Constable says in Bradford by waiving the CAS charge, the upcoming thing that's coming in.
Well, really, it's 86% CAS compliant, that's not going to make any difference to us.
Well, might
Could you
make
go
some
through the
difference.
chair? Right, please.
Except for a reason.
Okay. One of my questions I'm going to write to you about, in the interest of time. Very quick one. There's been an increase in speeding cyclists. Now, I'm really keen on cycling. I'm not against it. But the delivery drivers who are rushing to take a pizza somewhere and somewhere else and driving on pavements, are there any figures as to any accidents or injuries that this is causing? Any data on the subject?
And I'm not aware of any, but the Chief Constable will
We will have the data. It hasn't featured so far as part of our assessment of rising threats. What is featuring is the use of electric bicycles or electrically assisted bicycles and electric scooters as well. So there's been some quite significant accidents involving electric scooters. So it hasn't come up particularly. But I think there is a societal issue coming down the line around how we address all of those issues. Again, we've tried, the right local authority infrastructure and CCTV enforcement that can prosecute and deal with them all. But it isn't solely a police matter, it's a community safety and planning matter that we need to work together with. But so reassuringly, no, but there is some other emerging threats that we should be on the lookout.
I quite agree, and I know that in Leeds, conversations are being had with the delivery organisations, delivery weeks and so on, about dealing with the situation. But it does remain, well, we want to leave it in the bud before it becomes a real problem, and there's always something new. If there's nothing else on this topic, thank you for your questions and a good discussion. I'll go straight on to the published key decisions. Now, we've received a report on this, and the Deputy Mayor will give more information if requested. I would suggest if anyone does want more information, unless they really think that everyone in the panel should hear it, that is done in writing. Is that okay with everybody? Thank you. Go straight on to item 14, the Mayor's responsibility for current issues. Do you wish to give
just very quickly, we sent you a recent 999, not supposed to be a performance table, but it's a performance table that the government required from all police forces as part of their beating crime plan. So hopefully you found that useful. Just to say that in 2021-22, the number of the total contacts into West Yorkshire Police increased by 2.7%. It doesn't sound a lot, but that's another nearly 40,000 calls. I think that you take that into account, the performance of West Yorkshire is very good compared to some of its other most of the forces. But happy to answer any questions that people might have on that. And it's going to form part of our delivery quarterly meetings, so we'll be able to keep an eye on that, of course. Just like we'd all like to know that we're going to move it out of Plowland House, end of an era. We're currently emptying everything and shredding everything and we're moving out. We will be Wakefield based, that's where we've always been, and we will be Wakefield based. We're hoping to be a partner with Wakefield Council. Those conversations are ongoing. We've identified building, we haven't signed yet on the dotted line, so I won't tell you which building. But that's all going to happen very soon, but there will be a gap between us leaving Plowland and moving to our new offices, so our staff will be working and working from Wellington House in Leeds in the future. We had an event on the 12th of May, the whole of the Combined Authority, including the policing and crime team, to celebrate 1 year of our Mayor, and we've put a really brief summary of the first year of the Mayor on the table. Yeah, so if you're interested, just to tell you some of the things that we've achieved in the first year. Whilst we were at the Armories for the event, we also were able to see the at the Sharp End, which is a fire destruction unit exhibition of all the knives that were taken off the street. So please do go to the Armories and have a look at that exhibition if you're interested, and it's open until 25th of September. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on this? No. Thank you. We'll move on swiftly to the agreed actions log. We've all had a copy. There are 4 that are ongoing. Is there anything you wish to say about these?
No, obviously the office is in conversations now about making sure that we keep to the timetable. Sometimes it slips for good reason, but we try to make sure that we're really on time.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very handy documents. Any questions, comments on this? No. And the forward agenda plan, this is for noting, and we have indeed noted it. We may be changing the name of delivery quarterly because it doesn't really sum up what it is, which is performance management of key indicators, police and crime plan, information on the police for performance in general, without it being drawn into the police statistics about the mayor. Everyone happy with this? Thank you. Complaints received by the panel. We did receive a report. There's one complaint where further information has been requested from yourself. So
I think we sent it back.
As chair of the complaint panel, yes, we've received the information, so we'll be able to review that and move forward with the complaint.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that information. Okay, so any other business? No? Well, thank you very much, everybody. I look forward to seeing the members for a catch-up on the 24th of June, a brief meeting so that we just get to know each other a bit more, talk about the process and so on. And then the next full meeting will be on Friday, the 15th of July at 10 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you for very much.